Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone from whichever part of the world you belong to. Welcome to the 30th session of the online Optom learning series. Let me just introduce our speaker for today. Today we have Optom Keyur Savla. He is an optometrist. He finished his bachelor's at Lotus College of Optometry, India, and currently he is a PhD candidate at the University of Alabama. His special interests are in myopia control, optics, and anterior segment. And today he is going to share his ideas and his views on the treatment of blepharitis. So welcome, Keyur, and thank you very much for taking out this time. Go ahead, Keyur.
Hi, greetings everyone. I know we are at different time zones. Sunday morning for me, Sunday evening and night probably for you all. But thank you so much for joining today. And I would like to thank the OOLS series, especially for this opportunity, and Mr. Barodawala for allowing me to present this topic and share this information with you all. Without further ado, I think I will go ahead and get started. Okay, so we are going to be talking about treating Demodex blepharitis. And before I start into that, a little bit of my background, especially in this topic. So I've been working on a systematic review about treating Demodex blepharitis for almost most of the past 18 months. The review idea was initially proposed almost 2 years ago, and then 6 months later, it fell into my laps, and I have been working consistently on getting some information on this and creating a comprehensive guideline sort of. So I think that way I have learned a lot of this topic, and I would go ahead and start sharing the information with you all. So what we're going to be talking about is first, what is Demodex blepharitis, which I guess one of the audience member already asked if I could share something about Demodex blepharitis. So yes, that will be there. And this is going to be very clinical focused. So I'm going to speak about the clinical features, the diagnosis, like how one can go about in a daily clinical practice diagnosing this condition, and the management of this condition. So I think the most important thing or the take home from this whole presentation today would be is to remember that Demodex mites are present nearly in 30% of patients with blepharitis, and Demodex infestations are generally remain undiagnosed and untreated till date. We will go into a lot of details as to why this is happening, and things like how we can do better as a clinical community of optometrists to improve the diagnosis and the treatment of this condition. And the objective is to really understand how to diagnose this condition and the clinical management of how to best treat your patients, and make sure that they get the most out of your services. This so my journey started, as I said, almost 18 months ago, where it fell into my lab. Almost 2 years ago, my mentor, Dr. Andrew Pucker, was approached by the Cochrane Database and Systems Review to do a systematic review on Demodex blepharitis. A systematic review is basically looking into all the credible research and scientific data on a particular topic out there, and then putting it together in one document, one piece of information, so that it can be accessible for individual clinicians, researchers, etc., and they don't have to look for all of these thousands of papers that might be available on the same topic. So I was approached after a meeting by my mentor, and he was like, looks like we've been offered to do this review. And I was like, okay, what's the topic? And he's like, it's Demodex blepharitis. And I'm like, huh, sounds interesting. Now then, as an optometrist, I knew what blepharitis was. But I did not know what Demodex was. So in my head, I'm like, wait, I don't remember learning ever at all about this topic. And my mentor is like, so do you think you would be interested in like leading this? I was like, yeah, sure, I can do that. I got it. And of course, I didn't want him to know that I did not know what the topic was. And so immediately afterwards, after the meeting, I go and Google Demodex blepharitis. And yeah, a couple of hits show up, and looks like it is a blepharitis condition. And I'm like, okay, so this exists out there. Probably I just was sleeping in class when they taught it and taught it at Lotus. So I decided to go back to the old and faithful Kansky clinical ophthalmology and look up the word Demodex in the index. And surprisingly, in my copy, there was no mention of Demodex at all. And I was like, that is weird. Then I looked through the blepharitis chapter and I could not find anything at all. I was like, I haven't even seen a single patient like or diagnosed or heard of this diagnosis throughout my time as a clinician. So I was like, why is Cochrane wanting to do a review for something that is so rare? They generally do reviews for topics which have significant amount of information that people might get confused when they try to look it up. And so I guess it was a revelation that this condition exists, and it was a journey for me to actually witness the start of a new disease. And excuse my COVID references throughout the presentation, but I have a few of them. Uh, so yeah, and I looked up Kansky, it wasn't there. So then I thought, okay, I looked up at in the 8th edition, which is the most recent one, which is not what I used when I was going through optometry. And surprisingly, almost 1/3 of the Demodex chronic blepharitis condition in Kansky in the 8th edition has been revised to add Demodex. I was like, okay, if they're changing 1/3 of the topics as common as blepharitis, this might definitely be something big and I should look into and read up, at least for my clinical knowledge. And so that's how the whole story started. And so that everyone is on the same page, I will start right from the basics as to what is blepharitis, even though I know most of us have gone through this like a billion times since it's one of the first topics we taught in anterior segment in optometry. So blepharitis is primarily the inflammation of the eye, and there are lots and lots of symptoms. It can be irritated and itchy eyelids, and you can look at it as someone might say they have photophobia, burning sensation in the eye, etc., etc., like dry eyes, and anything in that realm can be a symptom for blepharitis. What we generally see on the slit lamp is dandruff-like scales on the lids and lashes. And as you can see in the picture over here, there are these tiny dandruff-like particles at the end of the lashes. And there can be many causes for these, and I will not go into the details of those causes because this is about Demodex blepharitis and not blepharitis. Um, and primarily, there are two chronic types. One is the anterior blepharitis and posterior blepharitis. Also, if you open, also the Kansky in the 7th edition will say, if you open it up, that there are these two major types of blepharitis. The 8th edition adds Demodex blepharitis. And most common forms of treatment are lid hygiene, basically. And you could say washing or cleaning your lids with baby shampoo, water, massaging the lids, etc., etc. And the list of treating blepharitis is like super long. Also, as a side note, all my references are on the same slides. So if someone is trying to look for the same information in the future, you can just try and Google these references and you would get a detailed set of information on what I was talking about. And that can be super helpful sometimes, especially when you're trying to read up something later on. So the next big question is then, what is Demodex blepharitis if this is blepharitis? I think a little bit of a giveaway was my points to remember slide, wherein I spoke about Demodex as a mite. So Demodex blepharitis is nothing but blepharitis that involves Demodex mite infestation. And these are the two types of Demodex mites found in humans. Now, I specifically say found in humans because there are other types of Demodex mites. Just the fact that they don't infest or they are not generally found in humans, we will not be talking about those. These are the ones that are primarily found in humans. The first one is Demodex follicularum, which is approximately 0.4 mm long. So they are super, super tiny. You probably need a microscope of some sort to even look at them and perceive them. And this one is Demodex brevis, which is about 0.2 mm long. So that is 1/5 of a millimeter. That is like the tiniest section on your regular ruler. So these are the two mites that infest humans, and as you can see, they have kind of like 8 feet. So they are classified as arachnids, and this is their sort of face or part where they feed, and their thoracic region and the rest of the tail and the body. Clinically, we really don't, it doesn't really matter about their anatomical structure. So I am going to skip all of those facts and details and go dive deep into their life cycle, and because that will be helpful to decide how to manage them, or what should the treatment be like. So the blepharitis Demodex life cycle of both of them, roughly, they are not that different, and that is, an adult will take about 3 to 4 days to lay eggs. The eggs will take about 3 to 4 days to hatch and form a larva, and then about a 7-day duration from there, those larvae will become adult again, and then the cycle continues over and over and over again. So if you add up these numbers, it comes around to 12 to 14 days worth of cycle, which is a total of 2 weeks. And one other important thing to remember about their life is what do they actually feed on? And they feed on the follicular and glandular epithelial cells that are present in the eyelids and near the lashes. Um, Also, if they feed something, they have to excrete something, and their excreta may actually cause mechanical blockage of orifices. And by orifices, if you go back to your eyelid anatomy, it would be meibomian gland orifice, where the mebum comes out of, or the follicles, or the hair follicles. These are the places where they might cause blockage. Um, so now that you know a little bit about Demodex blepharitis, you might be wondering, wait, if this is so common and they are there, why haven't we seen them? And like, what really is happening out there because of this? So to go into the epidemiology, Costin in 1967 was among the first ones to identify these mites in blepharitis patients. So he had some blepharitis patients, and he saw them in these blepharitis patients. We've known about these mites in almost about 100 years. I think the first reference I could find was 1915. But they were primarily classified as a skin condition. So you could get, just like you can get dandruff on your hair, and because of that, you can get a lot of skin conditions like acne and rosacea on your face, etc. That's where Demodex mites had been primarily classified as. But in 1967 and around that time, a lot of people showed that these are also present in the eyelids and lashes. And so they are ocular in nature. The prevalence findings are not very concrete, and I will go into the details as to why the prevalence range is so huge. So we have a prevalence of somewhere around as low as 29%. So out of every 10 normal individuals, you would see this in 3 individuals, and as up to as 100%, depending on what age group you're looking at. A lot of people are shocked to see that, or shocked to hear that these amazing looking tiny creatures, as I've fallen in love with them, would probably be creeping and crawling on some of our eyelashes as we speak right now. So yeah, I know that is gross for some people, but yeah, they are that commonly prevalent. However, they are rarely seen under the age of 16. Um, One of the reasons being that there are particular secretions from our sebum that do not happen, and this is what the Demodex mites really like or feast on, and that is why they are seen less under the age of 16. But um, after we grow into a proper adult at the age of 17, 18, that's when we start seeing these. The prevalence increases with age. So as I said, the prevalence findings are up to 100%, and some of the papers exclusively state that above the age of 70, every individual would have Demodex mites in their eyes. And since they are so common, there is a lot of controversy in the field saying that Demodex might just be a part of the normal bioflora of the eye. They are not an infestation probably, and we just see them normally because that's something like the gut bacteria that we have. And there are some um, postulated like thesis or theories that they actually might be beneficial and not all that harmful. And they affect males and females both equally. So yes, it's not that one gender is preferred over the other in this case. The prevalence worldwide across geographical regions, so far, all the information states that it is almost similar. But since our prevalence range is so huge already and we haven't narrowed it down, that is something potential students and future researchers can look into to see if that differs from region to region. But so far, we believe that the prevalence should not change because there shouldn't be any other differences affecting these Demodex mite. So how do you get it? Like, I'm pretty sure none of us are born with mites. So where does this, like, how do you contract it? And excuse another one of my COVID-19 references, but yes, it spreads through human contact. So probably your best solution is to keep a 6 feet or 2 meters distance from your closest other human being. But no, that is not something what we are recommending here. So yes, but it spreads through human contact, and it is understood or it is hypothesized that especially when we are growing up and say we are about the age of 16, 17, whenever someone touches our face or something like that, especially I know my grandmother used to love to pull my cheeks each time I would see her. And so I guess if I have Demodex mites, if I find that out, I'd probably say that that's how I got my first mite, and then they have not left me ever since then. So yeah, it spreads through human touch, especially if someone touches their face and then touches your face. That's a very common way to spread it. Um, it is not caused or spread via animals. So especially dogs have a condition which is quite popular. If you own a pet, it's called Demodex manti, I believe, and it's caused by Demodex canis. As I said earlier, there are lots of types of Demodex, and this is not spread via that. So if your dog has that condition, and if you end up having Demodex, that it's not the same mite, and it's not that your dog gave it to you or you could give it to your dog. So yeah, there is no worry over there. This condition might be symptomless and it often is, because I believe as optometrists we all believe that our lid is super hygienic and we have the least chance of having these. But I have looked at some of my optometry colleagues over here, and a lot of us seem to have it. And so I believe that yes, most of us do have it, but at the same time, it is symptomless, and this is where the argument comes in, wherein it might be just a part of the normal bioflora of the human eye, and hence we don't face any symptoms. And it can also spread via uncleaned bed sheets or pillowcases. If two people are sharing that, then it can spread via that. One of the recent researches I found was looking at how Demodex can spread via using the same microscope. A lot of us, especially like things like in optometry, lensometers and retinoscopes and ophthalmoscopes, as students, we tend to share a lot of those. And it might spread via that as well. Um, and it could spread through skin infection. For some people, it infects the skin, and if it is infected the skin, for the same individual, it might spread from their skin or cheeks to their eye. So there have been cases where that has been seen. So these are primarily the causes. And if you look at all of the causes, there isn't much we can do about these. Like, yes, I can understand we can have clean bed sheets and pillowcases, etc. But other than that, human contact is one of, as we are facing social distancing, we know how important it is. So I guess there's not much we can do about avoiding the causes so much. So to go ahead to understand what we can do to manage this condition, I think it's very important to see, as optometrists, what would your patient show up as in the clinic? Like, what would you see when the patient comes up with this condition? And since most of you must be thinking, wait, I haven't seen this super common condition in the past, so I'm pretty sure you haven't come across it. But no, that's probably not true. Most of us have come across Demodex blepharitis in our lives, in the patients as well. We just haven't been able to recognize it. And so here, let me give you an example of a case that I'm pretty sure all of us have seen. Um, a Demodex patient shows up, a blepharitis patient shows up and has mild form of blepharitis, probably in their 40s or 50s, and has itching, etc., the classic symptoms. And we treat them with asking them to do lid hygiene, like take baby shampoo and scrub it and wash their eyelids. And they're fine. After a week, you do a follow-up probably, and they're like, oh, this is perfect. Like, all is gone and I'm fine. And you look at the lids and they are all super clean. Everything's going good. And then you say to the patient, yeah, you're all fine and good to go. Keep up with the lid hygiene. But other than that, should not be a problem. After probably 2 or 3 months, this patient will come back to you again, and they they seem to have the same problem. And sometimes they'll be like, yes, but I already tried all of the lid hygiene. Like, I've not stopped it at all, and I've been continuously doing it. So I don't know why I'm getting it again. And we are at our wits' end. Sometimes we might think maybe the patient isn't compliant and they might have stopped for a while and they got it. I've heard other excuses like, oh, this patient has really oily skin, and that is why they tend to produce a lot of sebum, and that's what causes all of this. And things would be, other explanations would be like if you get dandruff on your head, it's highly likely that it spreads from there and comes to your eyelids. Or I've also heard explanations, so it's just a seasonal change. It's super hot in the summer, we tend to sweat a lot, and these kind of things tend to happen. Well, if you look closer at all of those cases, if you've ever seen any, I think you will find that it is probably not any of those other reasons but Demodex blepharitis that is causing the recurrence of that condition. So going on to what you would see in the clinical features, I think I've pretty much described what you would see. But here are some things that will help you the next time you see such a patient to differentiate between a common blepharitis condition and something which is Demodex blepharitis. So you have to understand that Demodex blepharitis can primarily be diagnosed by signs more than the symptoms, because the symptoms would be very vague and would be anything that could span the range of all forms of blepharitis, dry eyes, and conjunctivitis, and all of those. So that's why signs are more important in this case than the symptoms that the patient will tell you. One of the most pathognomic sign of Demodex blepharitis is the cylindrical dandruff, like scaling. So this image is primarily of cylindrical dandruff like scaling, and they're also known as coverts, depending on which part of the world you are. But what is important to remember here is that if Demodex is the cause, then your cylindrical dandruff is primarily stuck very close to the base of the eyelid, and it's almost always just there and not at the other ends of the eyelashes, or it doesn't really fall off, etc., unless it's huge in amounts, in which case it will fall off. But if you're just looking at a different blepharitis condition, seborrheic probably caused by some bacteria, etc., you will see, I know this is not a very clear picture, but you would see that the blepharitis scales or the dandruff scales are spread throughout the eyelids and not throughout the eyelashes and not just at the base. And just to go back quickly to the life cycle, life part that we studied about Demodex blepharitis, we know that they eat the follicular and glandular epithelial cells, and so those are very close to the eyelids, and if they are eating there, if their food is there, they probably reside there in the follicles, and if they are residing there, they would excrete in the same area, and that excrete would generally just collect in these edges and not spread far off. And that is how we can somehow say that this cylindrical dandruff is primarily being caused by Demodex blepharitis instead of any other cause. Also, other than that, as I already mentioned, that you have a lot of other symptoms. Often there might be no symptoms at all, and sometimes symptoms would be like itching, dryness, burning sensation, photophobia, etc. All the other symptoms that you can think of which affect anterior segment dry eye kind of conditions. And symptoms would also be associated with conditions like blepharoconjunctivitis, sty formation, meibomian gland dysfunctions. You might have had patients that come frequently to you saying, like, every 6 months or 8 months, they probably have a sty or a chalazion or internal external hordeolum, as we like to call them. And these might be just, sometimes these are just the associated condition to the primary condition being Demodex blepharitis. Not always, but sometimes they are just associated conditions. And we, of course, treat these associated conditions and they go away. But again, after a few months, the patient comes back with another similar problem, and we are like, oh yeah, this is a chronic patient, he's going to have this for a long time, probably an allergy or something like that. But it might be wise to look at the patient to see if they have Demodex blepharitis. And now that we know all the clinical features that we should be looking at, I think it is time for us to really understand how can the diagnosis happen, or what is the ultimate test that you can do in your clinic to say, okay, this patient has Demodex blepharitis and I should start treating them accordingly. Well, good luck there, because there is no official test for diagnosis. Though we've known for Demodex blepharitis in the eye for 50 years, the primary two problems that I perceive are, one, they are so tiny that for a lot of those 50 years, most of us didn't have equipment or enough technology to actually be able to diagnose it. And then you'll be like, but well, people had slit lamp in most parts of the world like 20 years ago or 30 years ago. It's not the first time someone saw slit lamp in this century. The other part is that we don't have any official test or clinical diagnosis set up or any guidelines. So most of the practitioners and probably even our faculty, that's why we weren't taught in school. And I'm so sorry if I was sleeping in that class, but I hope I wasn't, is that we are not aware of this condition existing. And we've been treating just the symptoms that show up. And for a lot of us, it solves the problem because it might just be that Demodex is a part of the normal flora and fauna. One of the reasons that comes up is that even though a lot of people argue it might be a normal bioflora, the thing could be that it is normal bioflora until it is in a certain amount. But if it starts growing in the population super quickly, that is when the numbers rise up, and that is when it starts causing all the other problems. So some of the controversy is that they help eat or digest dead cells around the eyelids and get rid of those dead cells and excrete it outside the orifices so that our glands don't get blocked inside, and then the cylindrical dandruff probably just falls off or we clean it off. But at the same time, the other side says that, well, that could be true until a certain limit, but if you have like say 10 Demodex mite feasting on one follicle, then they probably start causing all the itchiness, and they might start eating up all the good cells that we need. And going back to the diagnosis, Costin in 1967 came up with his own method or technique to diagnose this. But if I'll walk you through it, and you will realize that this is not something you would want to do in your clinical practice. And so his method was to epilate 4 lashes from each eyelid. That would mean 4 from the upper left, 4 from the down left, and 4 from the upper right, and 4 from the down right. Then to place them on a slide, the slides that we used in biology, probably in 12th, etc. To place them on those slides, add peanut oil and apply a cover slip on that. Then to place this slide under a microscope and count the number of mites. And that seems extensive. One, when I think of my practice, I don't have a light microscope in my practice. Two, I don't think my patients would be super happy if I started plucking like 16 eyelashes from their eyelids. They would go super mad regardless of how bad their Demodex blepharitis is. And so convincing patients to do that would be very tricky. So in 2005, Gao came up with a sort of modified version of it. And he suggested to epilate like 2 lashes, one from each half of the eyelid, so as to cover the whole eye completely. This cuts down the total number of lashes from 16 to 8. But again, his procedure was to place them on a slide, and now I guess we had access to saline and alcohol, so was to add 20 microliters of saline and or use 100% alcohol if there is a lot of dandruff or the collarettes, as we like to call them, stuck, to break up the collarette and place a cover slip. And again, count these mites under a light microscope. In a tertiary eye care center, that might be easily possible, but not in your regular clinic, where your most powerful tool probably is just a slit lamp. So I think Murphy came up with this guideline just a couple of months ago. This is like very recent data or very recent information. Is he suggests that choose an eyelash with collarette if present, or without collarette. So your primary goal should be to choose one with some dandruff present around it. With forceps, you don't need to epilate or pull out the eyelash, but you just need to rotate the lash 4 times clockwise and counterclockwise. And I've tried this on a slit lamp. It's kind of tricky. You really don't have so much space to actually rotate the eyelash. But yes, that is what his criteria was. And then to count the number of mites associated with the lash on the slit lamp biomicroscope. So you're not pulling out the eyelash, you're just looking at the mites on the slit lamp biomicroscope. Now, something you should know about these mites is that they are 8 feet that they have, along with that very sharp razor tooth mouth that they have. These mites like attach themselves super close and super hard to the follicles and eyelashes, and that is what causes them to stick onto there, and they are they are kind of burrowed into our follicles a little, and that's why we just don't see them on the slit lamp as it is, and that's why this procedure of rotating the eyelashes. And I think rotating the eyelashes kind of disturbs them from their slumber and wakes them up, and they wriggle around or probably move out thinking probably there is an earthquake on the eyelash and they need to find a new home, and that's when you catch them red-handed or in action. I also looked at what the new Kansky says. It is kind of a mix of all of these versions. And again, as I said, there is no official test for diagnosis, but you can try any of these if you have the microscope, and you can see what works best for you. I feel Murphy's 2019 list is kind of the best. So Kansky mentions using a slit lamp biomicroscope with 16x or higher magnification. Manually clean the base of the lid, and to get rid of probably all the collarettes that are present, with forceps to gently rotate or move side to side the eyelash for 5 to 10 seconds. This is really long. In some patients, I've seen that they come out super quick. But yeah, I think instead of rotating, moving the eyelash side to side is so much more easier on the slit lamp. And the last one is if one or more mites do not emerge, if that is that mites do not come out and you still want to determine if there is a Demodex infestation, then you epilate the lash and perform slide microscopy. So this would finally be the ultimate test in this case. But I think once we've spoken about what technique you want to use, since there is no official guideline, you're up for whatever you want to use until a guideline comes out. But until then, yeah, try your best to see one of these. I think Murphy would be the easiest one to do it without disrupting your practice. And what we would actually see is, and this is again a picture from Kansky because it's very hard to catch these mites in action. So this is a Demodex mite on the image over here with the arrow. And this image was clicked 2 seconds later, and you can see that mite has moved from there to there. This is what you would see. The mite comes out from the eyelash follicle and is running in some direction, going around, and they are super quick. Like, they are tiny in size, no doubt, but they are fast. They can really, really move fast. And it is hard to miss. If you're looking for them, it is hard to miss the movement. So this is what you're looking at when you see on the slit lamp. And this is probably your ultimate weapon for diagnosis, to see the Demodex mite move around, unless you epilate the lash and watch it under a microscope. So once you've done this, if it is so commonly prevalent, it would be very hard to decide whom to treat and whom not to treat. Like, should everyone get a treatment because it is prevalent? So I think that depends on the symptoms as well. If the patient is showing some symptoms that need treating, yes, you should go ahead and treat them. If it is not, then I would resort back to not disturbing something that seems to be in a perfect harmony or balance naturally. So going back to that, there is a grading scale that Murphy came up with, and his method, as I said, is quicker and less painful than the other methods. He also found that the mean of 1.45 mites per lash was detected by his method as compared to the epilation method, where the mean of 0.81 mites per lash was seen. Well, this data hasn't been verified strongly yet, but if it is true, then probably his method is superior than the other methods of using a microscope. So quickly going over his grading scale is over here. You can see in the table that there is grade and the number of mites. You have zero mites, you have no mites, which would be grade 0. You have grade 1, where it is mild, and it is 1 to 3 mites per follicle. So basically 1 lash per follicle. So if you disturb 1 lash, if you see 1 to 3 mites, that is okay. That is somewhere acceptable or normal. But if it is moderate, if you see 4 to 6 mites per follicles, which is the scale where Murphy says that more than or equal to 2 grade is abnormal. So beyond this, anything severe is more than 7 mites, and beyond this, anything you would want to actively treat these to see if, and especially want to correlate this to see if they have any symptoms. So what treatment are you going to use? Now we know how to diagnose it, and we want to go ahead and make sure that we're treating these patients. Again, as along the lines of diagnosis, there is no official guideline so far out there for management. And I know some groups like AOA and AAO, etc., are in process of preparing certain guidelines for the management of these conditions. But since it's been improperly diagnosed or underdiagnosed, we don't have a lot of information, and there is no official guideline. But current strategies, primarily any blepharitis, I think this is our to-go strategy currently, is improved eyelid and face hygiene. Wash faces, clean eyelids with all different forms, scrubs, etc. Then frequent cleaning of bed sheets, pillowcases, and hot water. This also helps. And this might alleviate the symptoms because it might reduce the load of Demodex mites. and may bring it down to like the normal level or the bioflora level, and your patient might just be fine. But and treating any associated other conditions, of course, that would be our primary concern because that's what patient comes in with. So these are our current strategies. And if your patient is fine with these, okay. And if there is not something you want to do more for this patient at this point, or you feel, yeah, if it is okay, fine. But if this patient comes back after a few months, or you've seen this patient come back recurrently, which I believe most of us have, then you want to proceed with managing Demodex specifically. So there are two options that come up if you look up in the literature. And first one is intense pulse light. Um, and I'm not going into a lot of details for this because this is like a pen kind of machine that is used in skincare clinics primarily, especially to get rid of acne marks, etc. And as the name suggests, it's a pulsed light. So there are pulses of one particular wavelength of light that are um, given to the skin or that area, and that potentially heats up that area, and it's not burning the skin or anything like that. It just heats up the area and it kills the mite. So there is one study in 2018 that proves that this is very much effective. The problem is it is expensive. A lot of us won't have it available. And you could try and look for a skincare clinic around you if you want to have a collaboration. But yeah, again, it is still expensive. And you need a professional to apply it. Like patients can't do this at home, or you can't do it at a clinic. You need someone who's been trained in this skill. But the second one is tea tree oil. And this, as compared to intense pulse light, is cheaper, easily available, and you can do home applications. But there are a lot of caveats, and I will get to that. In this image on the right, you can see some of the molecules. And again, in the reference below, if you want to look at all the molecules that have been identified for tea tree oil, um, you can check the reference out. And tea tree oil basically comes from an Australian native plant called Melaleuca alternifolia shield, I believe. So these come from the leaves of those plants, and now they're commonly available in a lot of places. They become like the natural treatment, just like Manuka honey is for a lot of conditions. And the reason being that these all components or compounds that are present. We do not clearly understand what they do, but these are their concentrations. And I wanted to show this particularly because some companies are manufacturing products for treating Demodex, which says terpinolene for all. And you might be like, okay, this is not treatreol, this probably won't help. But this is the main component, which is present in the most common concentration, and some of these other components also, and they help. These have been identified to be the most active against Demodex. So yeah, you want to do a little bit of research if you find a product at your local pharmacy to see if it's actually helping. There probably might be one because there are a lot of companies that are looking into this currently. So what are the caveats of using tea tree oil? Why haven't we started using it commonly, and why is it not super famous yet? Apart from the fact that the people have been struggling with a lot of other treatments. If you go online, there is a list and list of things, including pilocarpine, etc., to treat this. This has been the most effective, and that is where the review that I did comes in, wherein of course, there aren't many studies, and this is not statistically, this data is not statistically significant. This paper is undergoing peer review, so hopefully it will be published anytime soon, and I will share it on this platform, so we probably get emails about that, I guess. We found 3 studies with strong evidence or good evidence, and looking at that, even though this is not any statistical significance to treat this, the studies were compared to all the other groups. So I think Zhang 2019 over here was compared, and it used intense pulse light, and Ku 2012, I believe, did not use a treatment at all. On the other hand, and this one, the NCT trial also did not use any other treatment. And we see except for Zhang 2019 with intense pulse light, we see that the other two fared very well. So instead of not doing anything or just prescribing lid hygiene, Ku 2012 had lid hygiene as for both their TTRL group and the intervention and the non-TTRL group. I think it is beneficial to prescribe this and see if it helps your patient. So these were the primary results. The review goes into a lot of other details and you can check it out. Most of it is not clinically relevant and hence I've kept it out of this talk today. So your treatment plan, what should that include? Primarily, you have to remember that when I say tea tree oil, you just do not go to the market, buy tea tree oil and apply it on lids. Application of tea tree oil in low concentration, that is the most significant part, low concentration. Cause in high concentrations, tea tree oil is very toxic. The eyes burn and the burning sensation lasts for like a lot of time. If it ever happens, splashing water on the eye is your best way out. So yes, we do not want to, one, give patients access to high concentration because they might forget or they don't know what to do. That's why patient education is one of the most important factors. So what has been done out there? As I said, there are no guidelines. These are some rough areas that you could use as templates. One is in clinic management and at-home regimen. These are both possible. In clinic can go up to like 50% concentration. So basically you mix up half tea tree oil and half some regular oil that is not harmful to the eye, and you apply this. So you clean the eyelids, and then you ask the patient to close their eyes, and you take a Q-tip or a cotton tip applicator, and you scrub the eyelids with the eyes closed properly for say 5 or 6 times or a couple of seconds, both for the upper eyelid and lower eyelid and for both eyes. And this can be your clinical management. The thing I feel is that this could be done on a weekly basis, and then you can give the patient to do something similar for at-home treatment. And at home has ranged from like 15% to 5% concentration, and you're free to decide where you want to land with this at-home treatment. And the patient can do this at home probably twice a day, and this would help reduce or kill the mites effectively. There are commercially available scrubs depending on what part of the world you are in. I know some names in US, but I didn't want to put any brand names in here. So look around and see if there are any available scrubs or ointment, and that might be more easy for the patient to use rather than this tea tree oil wherein they would dip the cotton tape in the oil, etc. Patient education and constant follow-ups is a must. And this is where some of the studies show that this treatment tends to fail, is patient is not educated or there aren't constant follow-ups. A recommended duration of treatment is 1 month to 3 months. 1 month because that includes 2 cycles of Demodex mites, and that is the least amount of time required to get rid of most of the mites. Otherwise, they would just proliferate again and start causing the same problem again. And if the patient comes back to you after 1 month and you still see some mites, it's recommended to go all the way up to 3 months. If at that point you're still seeing mites, or if the condition is not resolving, it might be something else and you might not be treating the right condition. And patient compliance is a key factor. I believe up to some of the studies show that good compliance like causes eradication of Demodex mites in patients up to like 40% of the patients. So if your patient you ask them to do twice a day for 7 days a week, and the patient comes back next week and the patient says, oh, I've done it like almost all of the days twice a day, then there is highly likelihood that at the end of 1 month, 40% of those patients you treated that way would have no Demodex mites at all. But if at the same time, if the patient's like, yeah, I did it twice a day for the initial day or two, and then I forgot completely, because as soon as the mite load will go down, their symptoms, if there are any, would be like gone. And this is a classic case of the symptoms gone, I don't need the treatment anymore. And the Demodex mites will start working again, and probably the patient will come back to you in a couple of months with the same problem. So yeah, patient compliance is a very important factor. Last is, what should we record? This is more in terms of research, or to see how your patient is progressing. Of course, you should always record vision, but vision does not change a lot. Anterior segment signs and symptoms, if there are any, like redness, etc., some patients do show up with that, and we commonly do that when we do slit lamp, but we classify it as blepharitis. But this would be a big segue. One of the things that the researchers have been looking into, if you ever plan to share your data or publish, is the OSDI score, and which is Ocular Surface Disease Index Survey. It's commonly available online. You just need to put OSDI score. It's a very short survey, I guess 7 or 8 questions if I'm not wrong, and the patient fills this out. And over time, researchers have seen that this score changes. And the last is compliance. It is very important for you, especially as a clinician, even if you don't do OSDI score, is to see how compliant the patient is, because you might feel that this is not the condition and you might try to do some other treatment, but all it could be was that the patient wasn't compliant. So each time, if you see them weekly or monthly, each time you want to ask, how often did you use the treatment? And that would probably give you a rough idea as to where you should head further, whether patient re-education is needed so that they become more compliant, or if they have been super compliant, then we might have misdiagnosed this condition, and we should look for some other problem at that point and treat that. So to summarize, frequent testing for suspected groups. I'm sure we all see blepharitis patients all the time. And since the prevalence is so high, I think frequent testing for any suspected individual or groups of individual would be very helpful, since it's a very easy test, would probably take seconds on the slit lamp. It's high prevalence, hence there is an easy diagnosis, because I know it can be hard to learn a skill from scratch without any guidance or in clinic hands-on, but the prevalence is so high that if you start looking for these in most of your patients, I'm pretty sure you will be on top of this very soon. Keep a lookout for updates on guidelines, because the community is riled up about not having a proper treatment, and so guidelines will be soon coming out. And do not be afraid to prescribe tea tree oil. I know it's toxic and people get scared at the point, oh, it's toxic, I'm not going to do this, I don't want my patient complaining or coming back saying their eyes are burning, etc. Yes, it is toxic, but at the same time, you have to make sure that you're not giving them 100% concentration, and educating them that they do not go and buy it off the counter and use it, because that will be harmful to them. You need to make sure what the concentration is. But it's already being used in the hair care and skincare industry very frequently, especially to treat dandruff and things like that. So it's easily available out there, and a lot of people have been using it as a natural remedy or for these conditions. So I think it's we buckle up and use it for treating Demodex blepharitis as well, and we should not be afraid to do that. One of the things that I came across in the Costin 1967 paper, and I would like to end with this quote, is if, especially when performing slit lamps, sometimes some patients are really uncomfortable and they complain a lot about even the lowest light settings. And Costin says this while doing slit lamp for Demodex mites: if obnoxious attitude is exhibited by the patient while trying to discover Demodex, nothing is more humbling than to announce, "Madam, you have mites in your eyes." And this is a blanket statement. You can confidently use this for any adult, because you will be statistically probably right that the person has mites in their eye. So with that, I would like to acknowledge Dr. Andrew Pucker, my mentor, Dr. Jimmy Lee, who actually did a lot of stats and a lot of work in the review that is about to be published. Cochrane Eye and Vision team, they were super helpful in walking us through the Cochrane process, and UAB School of Optometry for all the help and progress I've made so far in my career. With that, I would like to thank OOLS and all of you for attending this seminar. I hope this was super helpful, and once the clinics open up, or you start seeing patients, this is something you would keep in the back of your mind and start looking actively and treating actively, so that this condition can be much better treated, and we will lose all of our those recurring blepharitis patients, and we'll be able to provide relief for them. I guess that is the end of my presentations, and if there is time for questions, I will take them now.
Okay, so thank you very much, Keyur. I think it was a very wonderful presentation, and to be very honest, when you gave me the topic, my thoughts were the same thoughts you had with your supervisor, that what's this topic you want to talk about, and I actually went back Googling the topic, to be very honest. So I don't think you were sleeping in the class. You were pretty much awake for your ocular disease class. I'm pretty much sure about it. So let's take some questions. We have two questions here. One of it is, yes, you mentioned about the tea tree oil, which can be used as the management. So should we actually consult the dermatologist before giving that, or it's not required?
So one, as I said, there are no guidelines. And tea tree oil is a natural product in low concentration. There is no harmful or long-term harmful effects. The most I have seen happen is irritation in the eye, and like burning sensation for a short duration of time. And if you wash it off, it should be fine. There are no contraindications so far as until now. But yes, if the person, on the cautious side, if the person is undergoing some other skin treatments, because there might be some patients who have blepharitis as well as some skin problems on their face, then it would be wise to consult with their dermatologist to see if it doesn't interfere with that treatment. But other than that, it is safe to use, as I said, especially in low concentrations.
Okay, and any tips on how would you explain the patient in layman terms about this particular condition? I mean, apart from the quote you mentioned, is there anything else you would bring it up?
I think, especially in my experience, one of the things that people really get scared about or would reject the diagnosis is when we mention mites. And we are used to seeing mites, but we expect to see them when I look into my eyes in the mirror. There are some techniques, or there are some instruments being developed with phones to try and see it or diagnose it with phones, etc., on cameras, etc. But they aren't advanced enough, and we haven't seen them yet. But I think educating them to show that this is something very common and the prevalence is super high, so they are not unique or rare, and that it like probably a lot of people have it and it's okay to have it. I think that is super helpful in pacifying them, and helping them understand that this can be easily treated and it is not something that they should be scared of, especially with the stigma that comes with the word of mites.
That's right. And yes, you mentioned about the range of percentage, which ranges from 5% to 50%, which is a bit larger range. So any comments on the minimum concentration? Would like 5% do the work? Any clinical experience on that?
So this is one of the things that the whole point of my review is to try and see what's out there and where we need more information. And as Manan has clearly asked, we definitely need more information out there. Any of you planning to do a PhD, master's, or even a bachelor's thesis, it would be a great topic to look into. There isn't clear guidelines or information as to what is the optimum or ideal range. These are the things that this is the range that people have used successfully. So we don't know even if 55 would be good, but no one has ventured that far, at least not documented literature, and it would be best to avoid until we know the toxic effects beyond 50 at least. But up till 50, it has been used successfully. So yeah, unfortunately, I do not have the short answer for that currently.
Yeah, true. And I think you mentioned in the talk, it could be taken up as a research project by the upcoming optometrist who wants to pursue higher education to check the various concentrations, like they do in myopia control for atropine. They compared 0.01 with 0.5 and 1%, so something of that sort. can be thought about in the effectivity of that particular treatment modality.
Yes.
Next question. Yeah, the next question is, since the prevalence rate is so high, should we start treating all blepharitis patient as Demodex blepharitis, or what's your take on that?
That's an excellent question. And I would say start with the worst ones or the most recurring ones, but not all of them, because sometimes the whole idea of the treatment currently is to reduce the Demodex mites load. Even if you end up eradicating them, it is highly likely that they will catch them again from someone else in their vicinity. So I think what is best going forward is to try and see if the most recurring or your worst case scenarios which are not being treated is to start treating them with this, but not treating all blepharitis cases with this, because finally the ultimate goal is to reduce the load, which can happen, not very effectively, but definitely can happen with just lid hygiene, etc. And once we have better guidelines and more information that it is safe to use, then yes, of course, at that point we can do this.
Yeah. And any disadvantages of thermal pulsating treatment for this particular condition?
So, unfortunately, in my research, only one significantly strong study, that was Zhang 2019, came up, and that was the that was that was the only study, and hence I cannot confidently say that there might be no disadvantages. The study does not report any, especially for the patient and the practitioner. But yeah, the other disadvantages are, as I mentioned, it's not easily available, it's expensive, more chair time, etc. But yes, the research is lacking in that area. So yeah, I don't know if there are any particular disadvantages, but it's been used extensively in skincare, and whatever I understand from there is that there aren't any significant disadvantages of using that treatment.
Okay. And the treatment normally works the same for both of the Demodex mites, what we have learned today?
Yes, as I said initially, that the treatment is same for both the mites, and that's why I did not dwell, so far at least, we do not, if there is any difference, we do not understand that yet, and that's why I did not delve into the anatomy and the pathophysiology of the effect of both mites. Demodex follicularum primarily affects it's primarily the cause of anterior blepharitis, and Demodex brevis is primarily the cause of posterior blepharitis. But yeah, for us currently, the treatment is equally effective, and we do not understand if there would be a better treatment or better way to treat one over the other, and hence yeah, that's what we have for now.
Okay, and any side effects of the tea tree oil on the ocular surface, or any complications in general, and would they end up having dry eyes? Any experience on that?
I wouldn't say they would. So once the review gets published, you'll see that, again, data in this area is significantly lacking. The studies that are published in the review do not really speak a lot about severe complications. Some studies do mention that patients feel uncomfortable, burning sensation, etc. And having used tea tree oil myself sometimes to try and see how it feels, it does burn in the eye if you end up applying it to the cornea for some reason by mistake. But apart from that, I haven't seen any long-term effects. But yes, again, no one has really tested putting 100% of the concentration in the eye. Yes, it is toxic, and it might have a lot of long-term effects, and hence the guideline limits the use of this to, or at least so far, people have limited the use of it to the concentrations that I mentioned and to the number of months that I mentioned. So it's not a lifelong treatment, but at least 1 to 3 months, and it should resolve the issue.
Okay, and just let's take one last question. As you mentioned about blepharoconjunctivitis, does this mites make conjunctivitis or other ocular surfaces inflammations worse, or does it only lie on the lashes?
Yes, so what happens is these mites feast. It's a bad cycle of problems. So one, these are feasting on all your good cells in the eye that are producing the anti-inflammatory factors, etc., like your mebum. And so these mites are feeding on that one, so they are killing all those cells. So you're going to have a shortage of these factors that you need. And on the other end, they are excreting stuff that might be toxic to the eyes. And so most of the times, especially in recurring cases, it has been seen that this has been primarily the cause, and that was just a secondary outcome or a secondary associated disease. So yes, this does make inflammations worse. And we keep on trying to treat the secondary associated disease, and we haven't been able to identify the first one. So yeah, that is definitely there.
Okay, so yeah, one last question which just popped up. I think we'll just take one last. Any chances of contact lens wearers to suffer from this condition, or is there any influence of contact lens wear?
Yes, definitely. Of course, the information, as I said, no one has looked into it, but definitely anything, like it has been seen that people using a lot of eye makeups, not cleaning their lids, etc., that is where it starts. And then because of some imbalance in the whole homeostasis of the environment, it gets affected. So yes, contact lens wearers sometimes, especially with TFOS dews and all, they are looking into it, wherein some of the dryness, we haven't really classified all the possible forms of dry eyes, and some think that some of those dry eye patients, which we aren't able to understand what is the cause, it could be that Demodex blepharitis is the cause. So yes, definitely screen and look for this in your contact lens wearers who suffer from itching, etc., or even dryness for that matter. So as I said, the symptoms are very vague, but if anyone comes up with those symptoms and you can't allude to any other reason, then it is no harm to have a quick look on the slit lamp to see if they might have some Demodex mites.
Yeah, I think the main important thing is follow up them and look for reoccurrence. And since we don't have much of evidence on the diagnostic tests and all that, so at least look for reoccurrence and at least see if people are having recurrent and not getting treated. Treat them as having Demodex, so that at least you are doing something good for the patient. So thank you very much, Keyur, for a wonderful talk. I think all of us definitely enjoyed learning something new which was not there in our time of Kansky, and something which is now being thought of a lot. Thank you very much once again from the whole team online Optom Learning Series. Thank you, Keyur.
Thank you so much, everyone, and hopefully you will have a great rest of your Sunday.
Yeah, thanks. So it's a Sunday morning. Have a good Sunday. The whole day is ahead. Yeah, some of the parts, I mean, here we are almost off to bed, 10:45 here in Malaysia, I think. So I would like to wish those who are celebrating Eid, happy Eid, Ramadan Kareem to those who are celebrating today. And I would like to wish those who will celebrate tomorrow in some parts of the world a very happy Eid as well.
Same here. Thank you.
So before we go, I'd just like to share my screen. We do have sessions planned up for the next weekend. So let me just share my screen and let everybody know. So yeah, there you go. So next week we have Dr. Nitesh Barrett, and he is going to talk to us about orthokeratology in practice. So please tune in next week, Saturday, 6:30 p.m. Indian time in the evening and 9 p.m. Malaysian time late evening. And see you all again next week. Until then, stay home, stay safe, and take care. Bye.